What if the fairy tale biography the world was sold had a missing chapter so explosive it could rewrite everything? For years, Meghan Markle's story moved like a perfectly edited film reel. Immaculate Heart High School in Los Angeles, a meaningful gap year, then Northwestern University, then Hollywood, then royalty, then reinvention, clean, polished, seamless. The kind of timeline that feels airbrushed before it ever hits print. But the moment Samantha Markle opened her mouth and pointed straight at 1994 to 1995, that seamless story cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet, unsettling fracture that refuses to seal itself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it that Meghan's official narrative has always been structured like a R-sum designed for maximum inspiration. High school graduation in June 1994. Growth, travel, self-discovery, Northwestern arrival in 1995. Each chapter neatly labeled, tied with a bow, presented as proof of drive and intention. It's the kind of story people lean into because it feels aspirational. No chaos, no scandal, just steady ambition climbing upward. But when a story is that smooth, curiosity creeps in because real life rarely unfolds in straight lines. Real life stumbles. It zigzags. It leaves behind awkward footprints. And in a biography that accounts for nearly every step, a full 12 months sitting quietly without shape or substance feels less like a gap year and more like a locked drawer. That's where Samantha Markle stepped in, not as a random internet commentator, not as a stranger with a blurry screenshot, but as someone who grew up in the same orbit, same father, same family tree, same shared history that predates Hollywood, predates royalty, predates branding. And she didn't just suggest the story was incomplete, she claimed it was missing an entire chapter. Not a casual teenage relationship, not a fleeting romance, an actual marriage. Let that sink in. And according to Samantha, Meghan was allegedly married during that missing year. The name attached? Joe Giuliano, a teenage friend from Chicago. Not a celebrity, not a public personality, just a private figure whose name suddenly became the center of a digital storm. The alleged ceremony, Las Vegas, small venue, minimal guests, fast paperwork, no spectacle. The kind of event that could be folded up and tucked away before the world ever noticed. And if that alone didn't stop people mid-scroll, Samantha went further. She suggested there may have been a pregnancy during that period, possibly even a child. Not speculation wrapped in vagueness. Specific. Timed. Placed within that 1994-1995 window. The reaction wasn't disbelief. It was shock layered with something heavier. The realization that if even a fraction of that were true, it wouldn't be a forgotten detail. It would be a foundational rewrite. Because here's the problem no one could ignore. That year is real. It exists. And it's never been fully explained that between her graduation in mid-1994 and her enrollment at Northwestern in 1995, the public timeline thins out dramatically. Meghan has described it as travel, exploration, growth. And on the surface, that sounds normal. Plenty of young people take time between chapters. But travel leaves traces. Stories circulate. Photos surface. Friends remember goodbye parties. Teachers recall big plans, especially in the mid-90s when communities were smaller and word traveled fast. Yet people who were around her at Immaculate Heart have offered almost nothing concrete about a major overseas adventure or extended program. And the internet noticed that a clip stitching together June 1994 graduation footage with 1995 Northwestern images went viral with just 3 words underneath. Where was Meghan? No dramatic soundtrack. No accusations, just a question hovering between 2 timestamps. Over 2 million views in a weekend. That's how this escalated. Not through explosive evidence, through silence. Because Las Vegas weddings, of all things, are not subtle. The city thrives on documentation. Thousands of couples file paperwork annually. Names get logged. Dates get stamped. Trails exist. So when amateur researchers began combing chapel archives and public records and couldn't locate anything tied to Meghan and Giuliano, the debate shifted. It stopped being "did this happen?" and became "why can't we find anything?" That distinction matters. That some argued privacy measures could have concealed it. Others insisted absence of evidence equals evidence of absence. But the very act of debating how something could be hidden kept oxygen flowing into the story. The missing record didn't kill the rumor. It complicated it. Then came whispers from individuals allegedly connected to the Giuliano side of the story. A Chicago commentator claimed certain relatives remembered a small ceremony in 1994. No theatrical embellishment, no dramatic flair, just calm recollections. One quote circulated like wildfire: "She was Meghan's before she was ours." 6 words. No explanation, just implication. A British tabloid added fuel with an alleged former neighbor recalling a baby girl appearing in the Giuliano household in 1995. We never knew whose child she was, but we were told told she belonged to family. Again, not confirmation. Memory. Distance. Hearsay. But in a narrative already running hot, it was enough that none of it came with documents. None of it came with verifiable proof. And yet, none of it felt random either. The details were precise enough to stick in people's minds, and through all of it, Meghan remained silent. No statement. No interview. No direct rebuttal addressing the 1994-1995 gap specifically. Strategically, silence can be powerful. Engaging can amplify. But when a public persona is built on transparency, when authenticity is the brand currency, quiet can feel like deflection, especially when the foundation of that brand includes reinvention, because that's the larger tension humming underneath this entire saga. Reinvention is empowering until someone questions what was left behind. Meghan's public evolution from actress to duchess to media entrepreneur has leaned heavily on personal narrative, on owning her story, on sharing selective vulnerability. So when a chunk of that story feels obscured, it triggers something deeper than gossip. It triggers scrutiny. A media analyst summed it up in a line that ricocheted across platforms. There's a fine line between reinvention as empowerment and reinvention as deception that line didn't accuse. It didn't confirm. It simply reframed the debate, because the conversation shifted from whether a Vegas chapel saw a teenage ceremony to whether audiences were given the full picture in the first place. And here's where the intensity truly escalated. Hashtags like hashtag Meghan's missing year and hashtag Vegas wedding surged. Genealogy sites were combed. Chapel databases were dissected. Yearbook photos resurfaced. Screenshots were archived. It became a crowdsourced investigation run by ordinary people convinced that timelines don't lie. What kept this alive wasn't a smoking gun. It was the empty space. 12 months. Mid-1994 to 1995. Graduation to university, a stretch described as transformative but documented almost nowhere. In an era before social media saturation, yes, but not before memory, not before community recollection, not before some kind of tangible trace. And in celebrity culture, absence becomes noise. Meanwhile, Samantha's critics dismissed everything as sibling bitterness. Their relationship has been strained for years. Public disputes, lawsuits, interviews. There's baggage, plenty of it. It would be easy to write the entire claim off as resentment. Except the gap still exists independently of Samantha. That's the uncomfortable part. Even those who reject every allegation can't erase the blank space in the timeline. And the longer the question remains unanswered directly, the more mythologized it becomes that somewhere in Chicago, according to online speculation, there could be a woman in her late 20s living quietly, entirely detached from this digital hurricane, or entirely fictional. There's no proof either way. No confirmed identity. Just a possibility birthed from silence. And that possibility has taken on a life of its own, because once the internet senses a puzzle, it doesn't let go. It doesn't require certainty. It feeds on ambiguity. It thrives in gray areas. And this entire story sits squarely in gray. No definitive marriage certificate located, no official acknowledgement, no documented travel record substantiating a detailed gap year abroad. Just fragments, recollections, and a missing chapter that refuses to fill itself in cleanly. By now, this isn't simply about 1994. It's about narrative control, about who gets to curate their history, about whether audiences are entitled to full disclosure or only the chapters chosen for publication. And here's the truth no one can comfortably swallow. Unanswered questions often linger longer than proven scandals. Right now, the story lives in that limbo. Not confirmed, not debunked, suspended, and suspension is powerful, because every time Meghan steps into a new project, every time her brand emphasizes authenticity, that shadow from 1994 quietly hovers in the background, not screaming, not accusing, just existing. Silence has weight. Gaps have gravity. And the longer this one remains untouched, the heavier it feels. And here's where this stops feeling like just another celebrity rumor and starts feeling like something much bigger, something cultural, something psychological, something almost symbolic. Because this isn't just about a teenage marriage claim. It isn't even just about a possible pregnancy or a whispered child in Chicago. It's about narrative architecture. It's about what happens when a public figure builds an empire on personal storytelling and one brick in the foundation suddenly looks loose. For years, Meghan's public image has leaned heavily on authenticity, on the idea that she's pulled back the curtain, that she's shown the world the real her, the messy, vulnerable, honest version. From interviews to documentaries to projects under the Archetypes banner, the message has been clear: this is my truth. But what happens when the audience starts asking if they they were handed the director's cut instead of the raw footage. That's the emotional undercurrent that made this explode. Because the 1994-1995 gap isn't loud. It doesn't come with flashing sirens. It's quiet. And quiet gaps in highly curated biographies make people uneasy, especially in an era where transparency is currency and personal narrative is branding gold. The internet didn't just latch onto Samantha's claims because they were shocking. It latched onto them because they offered a potential explanation for the blank space. Think about it. A missing year can mean 1,000 ordinary things: travel, work, family time, personal growth. But when someone suggests that missing year contains something life-altering, a marriage, a pregnancy, possibly a child, the gap transforms from mundane to monumental. And once that transformation happens, it's almost impossible to reverse. That online threads started mapping timelines like detectives. Graduation date, June 1994. Northwestern enrollment, 1995. Alleged Vegas ceremony, late 1994. Alleged child appearance in Chicago household, 1995. The pieces, whether coincidental or not, formed a shape. And humans are wired to see shapes that even skeptics admitted one thing. If this was entirely baseless, it's astonishing how stubbornly it refused to die. Usually, celebrity rumors flare up and fade within days. A headline spikes, social media argues, and then the algorithm moves on. But this didn't move on. It lingered. It resurfaced. It gained fresh traction every time Meghan stepped into the spotlight. When she launched new ventures, critics would whisper about the year we don't talk about. When interviews aired emphasizing truth and empowerment, comment sections would flood with references to 1994. It became less about evidence and more about perception. And perception in public life can be just as powerful as proof that some commentators tried to reframe the entire conversation. They argued that even if there had been a youthful marriage, even if there had been a teenage pregnancy, why would that automatically equate to scandal? Plenty of people have complicated pasts. Plenty of people reinvent themselves. That's true, but the tension wasn't rooted in the existence of a complicated past. It was rooted in omission, in the idea that a life chapter of that magnitude could have been deliberately erased from the narrative presented to millions. That's what people wrestled with. Because reinvention feels empowering when it includes acknowledgement. It feels deceptive when it feels like deletion. And through all of this, Meghan's silence grew louder. Not defensive, not reactive. Just absolute. No detailed clarification about the 1994-1995 timeline. No direct dismantling of the Vegas wedding allegation. No firm statement that such a marriage never occurred. Nothing. Supporters framed that silence as dignity, as refusing to dignify baseless gossip with attention. Critics framed it as avoidance, as strategic quiet designed to let the storm exhaust itself. That both interpretations coexisted and fed the fire simultaneously. This is what makes the whole situation so surreal. It lives entirely in possibility. No verified marriage certificate has been produced. No birth certificate publicly tied to Meghan from 1994-1995 has been confirmed. No undeniable photographic evidence has surfaced. And still, the conversation refuses to dissolve because the story now transcends facts. It's about trust. Public figures today aren't just entertainers. They are brands, movements, symbols. Meghan's image, especially post-royal exit, has centered around autonomy and voice, around reclaiming narrative from institutions that once controlled it. So when her own narrative is questioned, the irony feels sharp. A question that won't stop echoing. And sometimes the echo is the loudest part of all.